Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, anywhere you are. Welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to U.S. politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective. Hi. So my name is Clemencia Herrera, and I am the founder of Moira Studio, an advertising agency that works on political and advocacy campaigns that target Latinx.
And I'm Cecilia Del Cid, environmental and social justice practitioner and immigrant from Latin America, from Guatemala, community weaver, and also working on media.
Hello, Ceci. And so we begin Women's History Month with this podcast. And so we thought that we'll be doing a series in which we'll be asking women around the country who hold office. So they actually go through it. Around topics of being a woman, being a Latina in politics, and just, we'll just run off with whatever topics they think matters. And so today we're starting off with, it's so happy to have you here, the comptroller for the state of Illinois, Susana Mendoza. Welcome so much.
Hola, hola, arriba las mujeres. Woo!
Yeah.
Hola, Clemencia. Hola, Cecilia.
Bienvenida.
Very happy to be here. It's going to be fun. You guys ready to kick it off?
Yes.
What are we going to talk about? So exciting.
So let me tell you, I'm sure everybody's like, what is this comptroller? So Susana is the Chief Fiscal and Accountability Officer for the state. She's in charge of paying all the state's bills. And she was also born in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood to Mexican immigrant parents. And she was also a teenage soccer star. I didn't know that. That's awesome. And she attended Truman State University, Missouri on an academic and soccer scholarship, majoring in business. So she was elected the youngest member of the Illinois General Assembly, the first woman city clerk of Chicago, and then the first Latina independently elected to statewide office in Illinois. Woo! Man, that's a huge list of accomplishments. She lives in Chicago with her husband, David, their 9-year-old David, and her mom and her brother. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah, I didn't always
It took me like a full 5 minutes to read your accomplishments.
Oh, you're hilarious. No, my bio has been updated to say that I live with my husband, our son, my mother, who's 86 years old. God bless her, and my brother, who did not used to live with me. I mean, he's a grown man, but he unfortunately came down with COVID before vaccines were available. And he's a police detective sergeant in Chicago, and he was exposed, every day, and he spent 17 days in a row working without a day off in the thick of it. And he got sick in November, believe it or not, on his birthday. And 2 days later was hospitalized and spent 72 days in the hospital. And he lost both of his kidneys, had 5 strokes in his brain. And when he was released into my care and moved in with me. We had to move him out of his apartment and stuff because there's no way he could take care of himself. And he still has a ton of challenges ahead of him. And I only share this story because it is sad and we want this to be a fun podcast, right? But it's important because there's so many families who, even worse than what we're going through, they lost their loved ones because of the pandemic. So many Latino families that have been through hell and back. And in my brother's case, we're still very blessed to have him. I wish I didn't see him going through all the medical issues that he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his life. Like, he'll need dialysis 3 days a week for the rest of his life. And, his life is different. But I'm blessed to have an awesome brother. And, I'm happy to have him in our home. But it helps me even to relate more to what people are going through in my role as comptroller, having to pay the state's bills and having to, back in the early days of the pandemic, we had to do things like, there was a story that Anderson Cooper did of what was happening in my office on CNN. And we had 2 of our employees that actually drove like 250 miles from the state capitol to deliver in like a McDonald's and in a Road Ranger parking lot, 2 separate instances, checks for like $3 million to vendors so that we could get the PPE that we needed to give our frontline workers. And all these states were competing against each other, and it was crazy. But those are the kind of things we were doing back then. But, you know, when you have a family member going through it, when you're ordering things like body bags as a controller, it's or putting the money to pay for those type of things, I should say. It's a rude awakening of the reality of what we're going through. And so I shared the story because for anybody who's going through something like this right now, I can relate, and my heart's with you, right? So we need to do what we can to get our Latino constituency, everyone really, but I feel like our community has been disproportionately impacted by the loss of jobs, the service industry, the frontline workers, people who, Latina women in particularly have seen it much worse even than our male counterparts. And as Latinas in positions of power, it really falls on us to be a voice for them.
Yeah, but that also speaks to, the power of Latinas too. It's like, oh, you're my family. You need help? Come, I'll take care of you.
Right.
I'll do whatever it takes, even if I'm busy, even if it's something's going on with my life. My door is always open, and that's like a big thing about Latina power that I've always observed. So that that's a great segue for what we're gonna be discussing. When we were preparing for this podcast with Susana, I said, what is it that you want to talk about? And she goes, well, I want to talk about this work-life balance thing. And I said, I love it. I did not expect for you to say that, to be honest. But I actually do love it because men don't really have to talk about that, but we actually do. And we actually have to find this work-life balance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, men don't have to talk about it at all. Like, it's funny. We had talked about this on our initial phone call, is just the different ways people look at men and women in leadership, right? So if you think about, if you were at a board meeting and you've got guys at the table and there might be 1 or 2 women, because it's usually like that in a boardroom, right? You're lucky if you have any female representation, but we're starting to see more of it these days. But in the C-suite, right, you see a lot of men, and you might see a couple of women. But if a woman were to say, well, I have to leave this meeting early because I have to go pick up my kids from school or take them to soccer practice or whatever, there's kind of like this, like, that's like the reaction. It's not like, oh, that's great. But if a guy says, well, I have to leave early because I have to go pick up my kid. Oh my gosh, you're like the best dad. That's so awesome. He's so wonderful. Even like that stereotype is so wrong. It's for a reason, right? I mean, women are judged differently. Like, oh, of course she's got kids. Whereas, oh, he's such a great dad. Right? And a woman running for public office. Like I had mentioned to you that when I had my commercials up on TV, I had someone call me who was a supporter and who said, you look too young. And people are going to think, why are you running for this? You're young. You have a small boy at home. They're going to think you should be at home taking care of that child. And I think to myself, wow, this is from a female supporter of mine, right? Like we have to start by like breaking that train of thought ourselves as women and saying, hell yeah, we need more women in elected office, because when we have more women in elected office, you pass more legislation that is helpful to women and families. I feel like we are playing under this set of rules and laws that were created by men for the advantage of men. And you need more women in elected office to look out for all of the families, not just the male side of it, but men, women, children, our elderly. We are those kind of caregivers. And even like with the situation with my brother, I never thought I'd tell you that the easiest part of my job during those days was managing billions in state debt. That was easy. I know how to do that. Managing like life and death situations with loved ones is a whole nother ball game, right? And getting thrown into like a caregiver position, which I gladly did, but that was way more stressful than managing politics or debt or stuff like that, right? So, I think women are capable of taking on so much more than we ourselves think is possible. And it's almost like, if I had an analogy, I'd think of like, sometimes we're like that waitress who you see in a restaurant who has the charola, right? With like 12 plates on it and a few glasses of water or whatever. And you're like, you can't fit anything else on that. And she's going to drop that tray. But somebody adds one more plate and she still doesn't drop the tray. That's what women do every day. We figure out how to balance it so that we can still get the job done, still provide for our families. And unfortunately, we oftentimes put ourselves last in that equation.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to follow up with. Yes, we get to balance it and everybody else is happy. What about us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was gonna say that hearing both of you talk, like hearing Susana's responses, and then thinking about what are the impacts of like female constituents calling and still espousing. So I think a lot about like systems of oppression, and when I think about the patriarchy, I think about that we have all consumed it and we all replicate it. And when we think about feminism and feminist thought and women of color are always kind of being at the vanguard, kind of thinking very progressively about it. And women are the holders of patriarchy in many ways because that's what we believe are the norms. And I think we also think about like family, but also thinking like, what about like our like LGBTQ members of other women who are not in like a heterosexual family when they're not holding heteropatriarchal or like, these systems. So also pushing against like, what does it mean to always have to be balancing it all and doing like being the one who takes more and more and more. Right. Like that is against like capitalism too. Like what does it mean to actually think of a balanced life that includes rest, that includes you being able to say like, no, yes, I want to support a family member, but what does it mean? What is it to...
Yeah, and also to say yes to your passions.
You couldn't.
And also say yes to things that make you happy. And it's not like I'm going to sacrifice everything, including my own passions and my own happiness and my own mental health, It's kind of like, how do we balance it in a way that is also healthy for us, right?
Right. Well, I will say that I don't think I could have done it without the full and total support of my husband. And I'm going to say that because I feel like he is the unsung hero in this whole thing. I, as the elected official, I get all the, thank you for helping make this happen. Thank you for improving this part of my life. Thank you for your hard work. I'm the face that people see and associate either the success or failure to. But I can fully focus on my job because I have the most supportive husband. If you think about the fact that he has his mother-in-law and his brother-in-law living in the same household, and he doesn't complain about it. He fully supports it. And he gives me the support that I need without being intimidated by my success. He's inspired by it, right? He helps me to do better and better in my job. And he gives me this full support that means that I can have full confidence that I'm still a good mom when I'm out working, and I'm still a good wife, and I'm still a good daughter, and I'm still a good sister because I have this partner. And to your point, Cecilia, whether it's a heterosexual relationship or a LGBTQ relationship, it doesn't matter. It's someone who loves me unconditionally and who proves it every day. And we are a team. And so I say that as a strong, independent woman, that it doesn't make me any less strong or less independent to know that I have a partner who I'm sharing my life with, who gives me even more strength, right? I think I don't agree with we don't give our partners, whether they're male or female, the support that they deserve publicly. I think it's important to say that. I'm still super strong, independent woman, but I think I'm even stronger and actually even more independent, believe it or not, because I have this support network that helps me get through these difficult moments and makes me feel go ahead and do what you have to do, honey. I got this. and having, when I talk about work-life balance, is you really have to find this person in your life, the person that you share your life with, is really the most important decision that you make that impacts your ability to have a work-life balance. Because if you pick that wrong person, work is always stressful, even if you enjoy it. But to think about having a stressful day at work and then come home to somebody that is not going to bring you joy, but instead is going to add to that stress, that's where you know that something's wrong. And so I have to tell you, honestly, I don't have that. I'm very looking much forward to go home every day and unwind and, have my little boy run to the door and give me a hug and tell me I'm the best, and have my husband say, "How are you doing, honey?" Or "I saw this, good job," or "How did work go?" And know that he actually cares about it. And so if I would have gotten that decision wrong, it wouldn't have mattered what I was doing in my work life. I don't think I'd be happy. I don't think I'd be even as good at it. I was good at it before he came in, right? But that's also like being single is also solid too. Because I'd rather be single than be with somebody who doesn't make me happy. And when you're single, you can be happy and in love with yourself and what you're doing and all the things you're accomplishing. But when you're able to take it to another level and find somebody who also complements what you're doing and encourages and inspires you, and they're inspired by you, you're inspired by them, that's like the perfect thing that we should hope to have. And if you don't have it, walk away from it, because you're never going to find that work balance that you think is important and brings value to your life,
Yeah, it's definitely a symbiotic relationship in which each one of you, gives as much as they receive. And it's not like one is always giving and the other one's always receiving. It's like, equals. Like sometimes one is receiving and sometimes, but it's like at the end, I know from my own experience, like I wanted to be very clear to, whoever I was dating about, how important my career was, how important sometimes traveling for work was, and like from the get-go, or like, talking about having a family or things like that. So like, these are things that I just went straight up from the, not in the first date, but like, I started talking about them early on just to be like, are you the right person? Because these are things that really matter to me. And so it's you're right on point. And also, yes, the partners always help us get to that next level. You don't feel like you're swimming against the current all the time. You have, the help, the emotional help too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think you bring a very important point about, you're bringing about partnerships and solidarity and networks, which are what you're saying. I'm standing firmly in the network of my family or support networks, that being my community, that being friends, that being my partnership, and springing from it. What I think is most remarkable is that acknowledgement of recognizing that I am a strong, independent person. I'm a woman, and I am stronger and better and capable of more when I can rely on trusted partner, trusted community, trusted family, trusted friendships. And I think that goes against also like those imbalances of power, that systems that try to put us in those hierarchies or like codependencies have built for generations, for centuries, right? And like, based on your gender, those were like assigned roles that you could do and what you couldn't do. And we are trying to be like, this is just being a functional adult, and a functional adult being a male or a female in a partnership, doing the work that like everyone eats. So everyone should learn to cook, or like two people make a set of parents. Yeah. Why shouldn't they be both in charge and equally capable of taking care of that? Or what I
hear all the time is like,
so I think that your example,
I'm gonna be helping. Like, no, you're not helping with the baby. You are the father. And so it is your job to do that too. So it's not like helping out.
Yeah, you're not the assistant. Right.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. Exactly. I love that.
You're not the babysitter.
Yeah, but like, as Latinas, awesome. We're sort of battling this machismo that still lives in our communities. And like you said, the patriarchy also lives in women's minds. Like the machismo is enforced by you know, some women, and so it's like really surrounding yourself with not only supportive, if you're heterosexual, supportive man, but also supportive women that actually don't judge you for having a career and having children, or having married somebody that blah blah blah, like all these judgments that, you know, women have also passed on other women are they eat away at your soul.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely true. But I was saying too that I think as Latina women, right, we also still have like I'm first generation, and you know, my mom was always saying she was going to have to raffle me off to have grandkids and stuff like that, right? Because she's like, you're never going to get married. When are you going to get married? And even though she's supportive of my career and all that, I feel like we as Latina women get that all the time, right? Like, ¿Cuándo se van a casar, right? Quiero nietos, right? The whole, when are you going to give me grandkids? And I felt like I've always been very career driven and, you know, enjoyed working and wanted to make my way in the world before I settled down with somebody. And I never felt like I just wanted to settle down because all my friends were settling down, right? So I'm going to transition this to like what we were talking about before, that, you know, one of the things is that I think a lot of women, and certainly minority women, right? We really have to work harder to achieve like career success, right? And one of the biggest barriers to entry for women running for office, or even women pursuing like, you know, lucrative careers or difficult careers, is family planning, right? It's, well, I want to get married, I want to have a kid, and after I do that, maybe I'll go back to college or whatever. And you put your career plans on hold because you have to start a family. And you feel the pressures, you know, hopefully you're starting the family with the right person at the right time and all those things, but it doesn't always work out that way, right? And so a lot of times women's career paths are truncated, or they stop before they even really start because of family issues. And, you know, I love being a mother. It's wonderful. I started late in life, though. I didn't have my son until I was 40. I got married at 39, and my husband and I had never, either one of us had been married, and none of us had kids. And it was just like a lucky blessing that, you know, it was easy for us to reconnect. We'd gone to high school together, but never dated or anything. So all these years later, life brings us together. We start dating, we get married, we have a baby right away, and then we wanted to have more, but the more never happened, you know. And of course, at 42 or whatever, I had a baby at 40, but then my thyroid got thrown out of whack, I think because of the pregnancy, and it took like 2 years to get my thyroid under control and then try to start having kids again. But it just didn't happen. And I got pregnant 4 times, but I couldn't carry the baby to term because my eggs were old, right? Let's just be honest. And so I was telling Clemencia that one of the things I think we as women need to be talking about is how do we start planning early? We should be talking to our daughters about, you know, doing things like freezing their eggs, you know, when they're young and when they're super healthy at the prime of their life, so that they don't have to worry about finding Mr. Right now because they feel all this pressure from society and they want to have a kid, and actually be able to say, like a man would, right? I want to plan out my life. I want to pursue these career interests. And I have this insurance policy that I have these like prime or close to perfect eggs that are, you know, when you're in your 20s and early 30s, that's like the best time, really, like in your late 20s, to freeze those eggs. And then they're always going to be 20-something-year-old eggs, even if you have a kid when you're 45, right? Because you're going to use an egg that was 28 years old when you froze it. And your odds of having a successful pregnancy are monumentally higher, even if you're physically older. The egg, though, is what matters, and the age of the egg and the quality of the egg, which is really dependent on the age of the egg. So if you're 28 and you freeze your eggs, think of it as an insurance policy, right? So you can pursue your career dreams. And when you meet that right person, and even if you don't meet the right person, you don't have to. I mean, I would certainly encourage, a whole unit as a family, I think is going to be healthier and a better situation. But let's say you don't ever meet Mr. Right, but you're totally secure in your career. You would be able to be a wonderful parent and take care of your child, and you welcome that child knowing that you have the ability to care for it and provide for it. Why not be able to do that on your own? I mean, it's a different society. And I think that if people plan out what they want their families to look like, you'd see a lot less women making mistakes, rushing into bad relationships because they feel that their clock is ticking. And they'd be able to really just, go on, do the things they want to do from a professional career perspective, put themselves in a situation where they are dependent on no one but themselves to succeed and put food on their table and a roof over their head. And then if they meet the right person and it all works out, even if you're a little bit past your prime child rearing years, you still have these like perfectly great eggs that you can go do some IVF, and guess what? You very highly possible that you'll become the mother that you always wanted to be. So I know it's a little bit weird because most politicians don't talk about freezing your eggs, but I think definitely Latina women in particular never talk about this issue. And I wish that people had told me when I was in my 20s or 30s that this amazing technology was out there, because I would have done it. And then right now we'd probably have 3 kids instead of just 1. But I'm very blessed and thankful that we have the one little perfect guy. But I would want other women who are maybe hearing this podcast right now who maybe haven't thought of this to understand that these are real issues that as you get older are the source of many, many heartaches to women. And if you just, listen to this advice and go freeze your eggs if they're young enough still, go do it. Set aside a little bit of money, start saving for it now if you're young. I told my husband if we had had a little girl, just the way you put a 529 account to save for their college education, I would have started a savings account to when they're old enough, not make my daughter have to pay for it, but say, here's my grandkids' account. Go freeze your eggs. And then go enjoy your life. Idea. And when you're ready, dame mis nietos, right? But
that's a great idea.
It's a great idea. And so you even take the financial hardship off of your kids and start investing in their future.
That's a great idea.
Right? Like as a mom, if I had a little girl to start saving so that when she's old enough.
Yeah. As a Latina mom,
it doesn't cost her. You'd be paying for it. It would be the greatest gift a parent could give.
Here's the money so you can freeze your eggs. Here's this incentive for the nietos.
Y luego tómate tu tiempo, pero quiero nietos. Antes de que me muera, right? So that's right.
But
it's kind of something. I think it's one of those taboo subjects,
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be taboo. We need to talk about these things. We need to talk about the reality of how difficult it is.
This doesn't even get taught in school, or there's nowhere to be taught this unless, this.
I think this is just, that's part of reproductive justice, like a fair and holistic conversation about reproductive justice and about discussing the same way that you have access to having a safe abortion. If you got pregnant when you're too young and you decided not to have it, the same way you'll be able to know that this is technology that you have available to you if you are interested in being a parent and you are interested in pursuing a career and would like to just have the viability of a pregnancy later.
That's right.
in life.
And think about it,
I think
when my husband and I had our son,
reproductive justice.
Yeah, no, that's very true, Cecilia. When we had our son, we were so ready, right? We were in a really great mental space and a financial place where we knew that we'd be able to afford childcare so we can go back to work and stuff like that, where we could start saving for a college education. I mean, we don't make the kind of money where we can max out on that, but we are putting money aside and we're investing for the future for him, right? But the point is, we had so much more patience too with the newborn because we were so desiring this parenthood. But so many of our young women just rush into this. They're not ready, mentally or emotionally, to take on this really difficult job of being a good parent, a responsible parent. And I think if we were to educate ourselves more about how technology can help us to take care of ourselves first, plan for the future. And then when we are in better positions, both mentally and physically and financially, then be able to welcome these children in a planned fashion into the world. It's not for everybody, but I would certainly say we should all be thinking about what's our best path forward from a financial, from a mental, and from a family planning perspective. But no one talks to you about this. No one talked to me about it. My mom had no clue you could even do that. But if I had had a little girl, I would have absolutely started saving money for that, so that you take away the financial burden from them. But if I was in my 20s now and I heard somebody tell me this, I'd do it tomorrow. I'd be like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do, and get it done, and start. If I didn't have the money now, I would start saving it. So within a year or two, that would be priority number one,
Yeah, it's all about
and
having
then,
choices.
if anyone listening to this podcast goes and freezes their eggs, yes. I'm going to say this, though. If anyone goes and freezes their eggs based on my advice, I hope at least one of you calls your kid Susana, okay? Because that would be cool. Even a middle name is cool. You can name her Susanita, Susie, whatever. Just like something as like, oh my gosh, I did not think about this. This is great advice. I took it, and
Marta Susana,
That's
Maria
all.
Susana.
A nickname even, whatever. Something. I have to live on through somebody else's little girl since I didn't have one. Yes.
Susanita.
Yeah. No, but this is actually great advice, and I also didn't even think about
so
that
cute.
until you mentioned it. I knew that you could, but I didn't know that you could actually like plan it like that. So it's really interesting, the things that you learn. You learn something every day on this podcast. You heard it here first, everyone.
Yeah, and it's actually not. I know it's not that expensive either. I mean, it does sound like a lot of money to think like it's around $10,000, right? But if you have trouble getting pregnant later in life, and you have to go through fertility treatments and stuff like that, it is monumentally more expensive. Easily $150,000, $200,000 and if you don't have insurance, that's the kind of money you'd have to be coming up with to try to go through fertility treatments and all those things. So if you think about the concept of you invest $10,000 today for an almost guaranteed ability to have a child in the future, you're going to be saving a ton of money in the long run. So just kind of food for thought.
That's great. So we are sort of in the part of trying to wrap up.
And I also want to advocate.
I know that me and Ceci are very curious to hear some battle stories from you running for office.
Yes.
Sure. Oh my goodness, there's so many. I will say though, so you started off saying that machismo is alive and well, and it is. It is totally alive and well. And I would say that as the highest ranking Latina in state government right now, unfortunately, I can tell you that I got there in spite of the support of Hispanic men within my own community who are elected to office, right? And so you would think that there would be this groundswell of support of seeing a Latina woman kind of rise through the ranks, but it really hasn't been that way, and that's unfortunate. So it's the reality of me, and I think that a lot of Latina elected leaders across the country would probably tell you similar stories. There's always one or two that step up, but it's the exception to the rule, where it should be these guys all have moms that they love and they have daughters that they love. So why doesn't that transcend into the colleagues that they support, right? And so that's been one of the challenges. But when people ask me, well, how do you, what do you say to these, elected officials, these guys that, are upset about your successor, didn't want to see you rise through the ranks? And I'd say, I'm the highest ranking Hispanic Latina right now in Illinois. So that's the best I can say, right? It didn't matter that you didn't support me. It didn't matter that you thought women don't have a place in government.
The boys club.
I'm here. So there's enough other people that do. And the more of us step up, run for office and, champion women's rights and things like that, the more legislation will pass. And one of the things I could tell you is a big battle as a woman is just trying to even have the opportunity to get in the game. And if you have kids and you're not independently wealthy, It's very difficult to get in the game. People judge you differently as a woman because you have children. It's the number one barrier to entry is the ability to raise funds and ability to work when you have small kids and run for office. And just recently in Illinois, we passed a law that says that if you are a candidate running for office or in elected office today, and you have children, you can now use your campaign funds to pay for daycare.
Whoa.
This is a game changer for women. I mean, men can take advantage of it too, but it's a game changer for women because, you know, we can fight all we want, but if you don't have the time to dedicate to taking on these battles and running for office because who's going to watch the children, and it's very expensive. I mean, now you can't even volunteer for campaigns as a woman because many times you have little kids and you'd want to get involved, but forget about running for office. Even supporting a candidate that you believe in is hard because who's going to watch the children? So now you can envision a scenario where, let's say I have a big campaign meeting and I want to get volunteers, we can set up a whole room with like a paid daycare provider to watch all the kids while all the moms are phone banking or doing rally stuff, la porra, whatever. Things that in the past would have kept a woman from getting engaged. These laws are important, but guess who passed it? A woman, Senator Melinda Bush. And she was on the Anti-Sexual Harassment, Equality, and Access panel that she and I and another state representative, Carol Ammons, we were all a part of. We were the co-chairs of it. And this was one of the effects of having the statewide tour talking to women who had problems getting into elected office and what their obstacles were. And this was a key obstacle. And by listening to these women, another woman who was in the legislature went and changed the law and said, this is why women need to run for office, because when we listen, we don't just listen and it doesn't go in one ear and out the other. It goes in our ear, in our brain, through our mouths, through our fingers, into legislation, and we get it done. Women get stuff done. And so more Latinas, but more women running for office, less machismo. And when you see it, call it out. That's important.
Yes, because we are the ones that understand our own challenges. Nobody else does. And so we are the only ones that can actually find the solution to address them. So representation is, I mean, you just explain exactly why representation is so important. And it's such a, practical in real life story of like, why is it that representation matters? You're literally removing a barrier for a woman to run for office just because of legislation that was passed. So this was incredible. Yeah. That's every state should pass that.
Mm-hmm. And it is a boys' club.
Yeah.
Every state should pass that. And it is a boys' club. Yes. And the only way that that's going to change with time is having women have the ability to break down some of these obstacles that keep them out of the game, run for office, put their name on a ballot, and have other voters have a choice on who they send. But I think that you're starting to see that when women rise to these positions of power, great things happen, and voters are taking notice of that. So when women run, women win.
All right, so that is all the time we have for today. Susana, thank you so much. You just dropped some truth bombs like no other. It was amazing.
You're funny. Hey, next time con una margarita o algo, right? Have a drink. Yeah. Do a toast.
Yes. Well, I have some tea, but cheers to that. So thank you so much, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed this first part of the series. We're going to have some more awesome women joining us the rest of the month. If you want to reach out to Susana, if you want to hear some more truths, you can reach out to her on Twitter, on her official one, IL Comptroller, COMPTROLLER, or at her personal one at Susana Mendoza 10. And you can reach us if you want to get in touch with Susana or any of the awesome women that we're going to be having. You can reach us at LatinXYZ Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And you can email me, clem@latinxyzpod.com. And that's all for today. Yes. Yes. Go women.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for kicking off the awesome Women's Heritage Month, right? With me, it's an honor, and it was super fun to hang out with Cecilia and Clemencia, so thank you, and hope to see you if you're ever in Chicago or Illinois, look me up, okay? Gracias, hermanas.
Yes.
Keep doing the amazing work that you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Muchas gracias.
You guys too.